What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Stephen Mera, who is a parapsychologist, paranormal investigator, freelance journalist, lecturer and tutor. He is the owner of the free monthly publication known as Phenomena Magazine, and chairman and founder of the scientific establishment of parapsychology in Manchester, England. He is the author of 3 books: Strange Happenings, Memoirs of a Paranormal Investigator, Paranormal Insight, a concise study of the strange and profound, and the Paranormal Investigator's Handbook, a professional look at the subject of ghost hunting. He has appeared on over 90 TV shows and over 100 radio stations, and has published articles in 300 publications internationally. He joins me today to discuss his latest book, The Rochdale Poltergeist, a True Story. Stephen Mera, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on, Stephen. And we did plan this to have Jenny Ashford, who helped bring this book together as well, on this interview. But unfortunately, that's not panned out. So I'm sure we'll bring Jenny into this
Yes,
as well.
Sure.
Really fascinating book. This is a really interesting case, this is. But to begin with, I just want to get a bit of background on yourself as well, of course. Now, from what I understand, your father was a UFO investigator, and of course this got you onto the path of what you eventually went on to do. So just tell us a bit about your upbringing.
Okay. As a child, I was reading a lot of my father's books, interested in the subject. And of course, he had a lot of the old UFO books, like the Eric von Daniken and the paranormal ones and things like that. And of course, I got interested as a child. And as you remember back to those old days, he was watching Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. And of course, I absolutely found them fascinating. And, it never left me. And after leaving school, of course, I carried on to do different types of courses at colleges and university. But I always made time to join organisations and establishments that investigate such phenomena. And the first one I joined was the British UFO Research Association, before investigating UFOs. Now, I started off in aerial phenomena, which many people ask me. And of course, I've led all the way through to paranormal and parapsychological research, because as time's gone on and I opened a number of organisations along the way, lots of people come into me saying that they're interested in the paranormal field just as much as aerial phenomena. So we started to encompass it. And I took over an organisation in 1989 known as MAPIT, which has been running since 1974, which was owned by David Rees from Stockport. I took over as chairman in 1989. We also opened the scientific establishment of Parapsychology based in Manchester in 1995. We wrote the British Investigators Training Course, which is the most comprehensive course in the world as far as we know, in the methodology, investigation and research of all things anomalous, profound, unusual, which does include paranormal research and ufological research as well. From that, I kind of got involved in numerous things, such as writing for television shows, such as Strange But True, Revealing Secrets, the National Geographic Channel. And then, purely by chance, I started working on a corporate investigation, simply because one investigation came into me, which was at Sunlight House in Deansgate, Manchester, which was at that time owned by the Ministry of Defence. The information had come my way by the Manchester Public Relations Office. They were having some disturbances take place there, and they asked me to go in secretly. Actually, all of our investigators were looked and dressed like electrical engineers. So it was all very hush-hush at the time, Kevin. And of course, corporate investigations, you've got to have remain, you've got to retain that confidentiality, as you can well imagine. Once we did, we did do a good job, and we're pleased with what we did. But since then, we ended up on a network of people contacting us through the Public Relations Office. There must be some information out there on some type of network that they get hold of me in regarding doing these cases for them on a confidential level. And I'd done many work for quite a number of supermarket chains, businesses, football and rugby grounds, city councils, tenants associations. And I did that for many years on a confidential level. At the same time, still doing with residential and private investigations. As time's gone on, I started appearing in television shows. I think I've done about 108 TV shows, wrote 4 books, working on my 5th. And I'm currently working on Phenomena Project with Don Phillips. And I believe you know Don Phillips. You've met Don Phillips.
I have, yeah.
And he's, as you probably imagine, he's quite an incredible guy in regarding his capabilities, obtaining communication with, I don't know, spirits. I don't like to label things, but by all intents and purposes, he came under parapsychological department at SEP, and the information and evidence that he provided for us led us to conclude that he must be some form of catalyst. And we're currently doing a television show called Phenomena Project, which is taking us abroad, obviously, next year as well for filming. And of course, I run the long-standing Phenomena magazine, which we own, and that's been going for about 6 or 7 years now, up to issue 76, I believe. So, all very busy.
Yeah. No, it's very fascinating to your background. It really is. And also, just for those who may not know, what is a parapsychologist?
Well, parapsychologist, formally, he's a person who investigates scientifically extrasensory perception, or you might refer to it innate abilities. Do they exist through test procedures and those sort of things? So it isn't really paranormal research in a sense of speaking. The only paranormal research we tend to get involved in is those when it involves people who have maybe certain abilities which might be worthy of further study, investigation, evidence and analysis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, prior to this case in 1995, did you believe in the idea that life continues, that there may be other realities apart from this?
To be honest with you, not at all. I didn't. I'm very, very skeptical in 1995. And when I first found this case, it came to me via way of Rochdale City Council asking for assistance. It had already reached, unfortunately, media coverage. The Manchester Evening News had run an article, quite a large article, full page, and the title was something like "Spooky Spills Scare Family from Home." And to be honest with you, I had a raised eyebrow and a little bit of a giggle at that, Kevin, as you can well imagine. But when Rochdale City Council asked for my assistance, they became our clients, and we went and sat down and interviewed with them at Rochdale in their office, and to find out all the information from them, such as, you know, the reasons why they wanted our assistance, what have they done so far, what involvement have they had with the case, and how do they see it? Have they found any evidence? Is there any reason what they may consider it to be a hoax? Why would they? And basically just lay everything out on the table for us, so we know what, when we are going to be involved, we go in with clearly knowing everything we possibly can at that time.
Interesting. And, you know, I think when you read the book, it's quite a nice, simple read. Yet it's truthful. That's what I got from it. This is a true case. This really happened. These people, you know, do exist. This property is still there, is it not?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, still there.
And you have to really go with what resonates with yourself. Because sometimes when, you know, I think you were potentially meant to have these experiences for you to have your own experience, for you to have your own truth, in a sense, because there's multiple truths out there, isn't there? Not one person believes in the same thing, yet they will stick by their truth and defend them, even though they may not be the right facts sometimes, but they do.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I was taught scientifically, analytically, I look at things, and I was quite comfortable up till 1995 with saying, yes, okay, I may have experienced a number of things since 1983 and starting in the subject, which is almost 33 years back. Yeah, I may have seen a few things out the corner of my eye, and, you know, the odd thing go bump in the night, as you might say. But then, you know, you have to question your own perception, you know, the situation, the environment, the people that you're with, the unusual sounds that might be heard with, simply because you're unaware of the environment. You have to take all those things into consideration. And I was quite happy at rationalising pretty much 99% of what I'd experienced up till 1995, when this particular case turned not only my life upside down, but led me in a direction to where I am now.
Absolutely, and you know, there's some really fascinating aspects to this case. I've got to say. And now the case that we're talking about is what's on the screen now, the Rochdale Poltergeist, a true story. This is now. Okay, so if we go back to July 1995, this is when, I don't know, it talks in the book of a sort of historic heat wave and the beginning of a months-long ordeal that would, as you say, turn your world upside down. Now, just tell us about the Gardner family, who were the tenants of the council property in Foxholes Close. Who were these people? Did they have any beliefs in the paranormal?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, when we talk about poltergeist infestations, Hollywood movies would lead us to believe it's a stormy night, it's a spooky house. This was on a hot, beautiful summer's day, flowers out, birds were singing, in a prefabricated bungalow, which were initially only generally built for, you know, temporary homes, but became permanent fixtures. The Gardner family had lived there for around about 14 years. They didn't want to move. They were quite happy living at the location. In fact, they'd spent a lot of money, and it was a beautiful garden. You know, Mrs. Gardner was keen gardener, and you could clearly see that they were happy there until these events started to unfold. When I first met the Gardner family, the first impression was, as soon as Mrs. Gardner opened the door, there was tears in her eyes. She was very, very emotional. She was very upset. I could see that she was, you know, she'd had sleep deprivation. I comforted her. She asked me, you know, I hope I can help. And I said, well, you know, we'll see. Let's do one step at a time. And I was asked inside the home, along with a number of other investigators, to conduct our first interview. The first thing I noticed was the coverings over the carpets, over their furniture. It was plastic sheeting. There was plastic sheeting all over. And in fact, it was impossible to walk on the floor without making any noise. And I thought, how very unusual. But then you could clearly smell in the air that damp smell from things that had got wet. And obviously there would obviously be water damage to some parts of the locations. But as far as I'm concerned, they were very, very sincere. I watched the body language, eye contact, the way the stance, the movement, the posture, their attitude regarding questions. Did they visually point out in reference to locations, which means that they're reliving that event as opposed from manufacturing it. There are lots of different methods in questioning. And I believe them to be absolutely 100% sincere at the time.
Yes, absolutely. Now, family members' names. So you've got the mum and the dad.
Yes, you got Mr. and Mrs. Gardner and their daughter, which was Jeanette.
Now, what was different about Jeanette?
Well, Jeanette was in her 30s, but she did have some type of problem. She did have a mental disability of some sort, which gave her the mindset of a child, basically, of a teenager maybe. And yet Jeanette had a daughter herself, so they did have a grandchild which wasn't living at the home at that time.
Right.
Mrs. Gardner had lost her husband prior, about 7 years back from that event, to a heart attack in the home, in the bedroom. But she had recently met somebody else, and she had married a Mr. Gardner, who was clearly a little bit more laid back. He had longish hair in a ponytail. He seemed to be, yes, very sincere, but a slightly different attitude towards the paranormal. He wasn't shaken as much, but was clearly looking for assistance.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for selling that. So let's just look at some of the manifestations here. So, spontaneous appearance of water dripping from the ceiling. Now, I've never heard this in a poltergeist case before myself. You went on to investigate other cases, or to research other cases, where this would have existed. Just talk us through what the hell was going on here.
Well, manifestations, they don't get reported very often, but when they are, they're usually associated to what those high-level poltergeist infestations. Now, manifestations usually consist of water when they do happen, which is a rarity in itself. And even more of a rarity is it ever to be caught on film or camera and so on and so forth, especially analysis. On a very, very rare occasion, there has been some documents been located from other cases around the world where even blood and tar has been located on extremely rare cases. But I never, it's just one of those things. Do you actually believe it? I wouldn't have done unless I'd seen it, to be honest with you. I was told that these outpourings of water would suddenly start. Rochdale City Council had gone in there, couldn't find any rational explanation as to why the water would suddenly appear on ceilings and doors. And not just that, but also it would appear as if it had been raining indoors. Of course, I took it in stride. It's very hard to believe. I went up in the loft along with other fellow researchers. It not only was it dry up there, it was absolutely dusty. There were no water pipes in the loft area because it being a solid floor. The water pipes came in from underground and basically fed downwards, and distributed around the home. So there was no header tank up there. So there was no water up there at all.
No.
So to suddenly see water appearing on a ceiling, and move. This is the crunch of the matter. It moved as if it was intelligently controlled around a light fitting. Now, at the same time, this shimmer of water travelling across the ceiling didn't drip down to the ground whilst it was in the hallway. There were no drips coming down to the ground whatsoever. It was moving across the ceiling, and the only way I can describe it is if you imagine filling up a glass of water and stood in your kitchen and you threw a glass of water across your kitchen floor, you'd see it arc out in this fashion and move in that direction of force. That is exactly what we were seeing up on the ceiling now, but intelligently got to a light fitting and decided to move around it. Now, it was an absolutely purpose maneuver. It could not have been by chance. The way it moved was definitely showed intelligence. And to be honest with you, I'd spent, 12 years in the field at this time, and thought I'd pretty much experienced all sorts of things. Not until that. And one investigator, if you picture the scene, I had this in camera around me on a strap. And one of the investigators shunts me with his elbow and says, "Are you taking a photo?" Because I'm stood there and I'm looking up at this thing and I'm absolutely in awe. And do you know what? Believe it or not, it didn't even occur to me to grab my camera and take a photograph until someone nudged me, because it was that hypnotic to see. I'd never seen anything like it. It was truly profound.
Absolutely amazing. And for those listening to and watching this now, you can't take away your truth. You saw this. This is your experience. You can't prove it. I'm sure we're going to get into the documented side of this as well. But it's just one of those things that unless you see it with your own eyes, sometimes you just it's very difficult to prove to someone that's so shut down. But this is true. This happened.
Oh yeah, it happened. It happened. Amongst the 5 witnesses. We did manage to get it on photograph. We photographed the events as it unfolded, as it moved. We also were very quick to think analysis, because at that time, we had numerous contacts, and people who we were working with had contacts with, scientific departments. We decided to take a sample, a control sample from the water from the bathroom out the tap, and take a sample from the ceiling in a sample bottle. So we had the sample. 2 different samples, one controlled one from the ceiling, and we sent them off to Northwest Water Laboratories for analysis, and we awaited their response. And whilst we were waiting for their response, we conducted quite a lengthy investigation over a period of almost a week.
Well, this is what we're going to get into as well. Now, just had a question there, and it's gone out of my head, which is great. Okay, let's just a couple of things as well. Just before we move into the investigation, there's movement of objects as well. There was the sounds of people, someone with a bad breathing. There was footsteps. It's not just the water, was it?
Oh, no. We had the run-of-the-mill, what you refer to as a poltergeist type activity taking place. We had an object that suddenly appeared in the middle of the lounge. Absolutely could not have done so without us knowing, because it was so prominent. We would have tripped over it. It was so in the way in the middle of the lounge. It appeared from nowhere, and it was a small 12-inch statuette of a Themis, which represented justice. And we found it interesting, and we just noted it there, and I thought that was unusual. Where's that come from? There was a bit of a discussion, a bit of a fuss about it at that time. We hadn't had a clue where it come from. So I remember picking it up, and what was interesting is when I picked it up, it was quite warm. Warm as in, sort of warm water temperature. It was definitely warmer than it should be. I picked it up, noted it was warm. And I didn't know where to put it, so I just placed it on a mantle, and I thought, well, we're going to have to ask, because at this time the Gardner family we'd relocated them for 24 hours, so we had the home to ourselves, so it totally eliminates any hoaxing from human agencies such as be living there. So first thing that we did is I decided to have a look through the tape recordings, because our process of investigation was, when we enter into a building, we do a 360 recording on tape of all the shelves and all the ornaments and all the things in that lounge, just in case something such like this might happen. So we can go back and have a look and kind of work out where it's come from. We went through those videotapes, going, that item, that object, wasn't even in the house in the morning when we got there. We had no idea, so we knew that we'd have to ask Mrs. Gardner when she returned the following day. But apart from that, we had a clock radio in the bedroom, which was actually held in our hands. No batteries in it. It wasn't plugged into the wall, and yet it was operating and saying words. Now, the words that were coming through it were not radio signals. They were definite words associated maybe to some type of communication, maybe. I don't know, but it was not a radio show that were coming through. And that was working on its own. There was a number of propellants, such as a battery that was thrown across the room so hard that it inundated into the wall. a good centimetre. So that would have been dangerous if it had hit somebody. There was movement around the building. You could clearly hear somebody walking backwards and forwards when nobody was. There was a sound of heavy breathing. There were raps and bangs and tapping sounds. And of course, further manifestations of water to a ridiculous level took place the following day.
Right, yeah, because Mr. Gardner, as you saw him once in the kitchen, would actually hold an umbrella, wouldn't he? While this water
it was quite profound, that incident.
Yeah,
the following day, how the series of events came about is I had two investigators in the living room, and all of a sudden, one of them shouted out, "Water's just appeared," and the whole lounge door was beaded in water as if somebody had thrown water all over it. I asked them, and said it just seemed to just appear from nowhere. It just seemed to come out of the door, in a sense of speaking. And no sooner as it disappeared. It was so profound. It had disappeared into nowhere. About half an hour later, the Mr. Gardner had offered to make us all a cup of tea. And off he trotted into the kitchen. And I remember him shouting out to us, and we ran into the kitchen, and there was the most profound sighting you'd ever seen. Mr. Gardner was sat there next to the cooker with a large umbrella up as it was absolutely throwing it down in the kitchen. This isn't drizzle. These are heavy, heavy droplets of water. Now, there's one scene I'll never get out of my mind, and that's my cup of tea sat on the side with just a little bit of milk in, ready for Mr. Gardner to have done it, and the milk is splashing out of the cup because the heavy drops of water falling into the cup and just splashing into the milk. I never forget that scene in my head. And of course, he just had this smirk on his face as if to say, "I told you so." And when I looked up, the whole ceiling in the kitchen was like a shimmer of moving water. And at the same time, it was heavy droplets were forming and falling down onto everything in the kitchen. The whole surface, the kitchen surface, the floor, the cooker, everywhere was soaked through. And Mr. Gardner just sat there with an umbrella up, very calm and very collective. And we were all we couldn't believe what we were seeing. What was really interesting is that, it only happened for about maybe 3 minutes, and then it kind of just went zoom. It just disappeared back into the ceiling as if it was a sponge. Mr. Gardner just jumped up and just, as normal routine must have been for him, just grabbed the mop and grabbed the cleaning things and started cleaning and wiping up all the mess. It was so strange to see.
Absolutely, and just to note that these were on two separate occasions. We're dipping in and out of the investigation where you was on your own at the property, and of course prior to that when you first came to see the property as well. And one interesting thing you did as well is as you left on the first occasion, you left behind a working tape recorder for about 10 minutes as you drove around the corner, just to see what their reaction was going to be as you left the property. Just tell us about that.
Well, it's a little technique that I'd learned many years ago. There are actually a number of little techniques you can do. And this one is quite a good one. And basically, you leave a recorder, a small handheld recording. And I tend to place it when I'm sat on a settee and interviewing the families. I usually have a habit of just sort of sticking it down between the cushions or behind a cushion and leaving the recorder running, and then departing the building for about 10 minutes, and then coming back, knocking on the door and saying, "I think I must have left a piece of equipment," and just kind of have a look around. And I seem to find it on the settee, and then I press stop without them seeing it. And of course, I say, "Thank you, I found it," and then I head back. And usually what I do is I go and park up around the corner and have a listen back to the recording after I left. And what was really interesting is that you can clearly hear the family on the recording saying, I don't think he's going to believe us. Do you think he can help us? What we're going to do? I can hear Vera getting upset. And do you know what? That to me is just 100% sincerity.
Absolutely, and you mentioned as well just earlier on about photos and video that were taken. Where are those photos and video now?
Oh, we've got all the material, and of course we have released the photographs. We've also released the analysis back from Northwest Water Laboratories, which was again fascinating because an incident had taken place on one of the nights. I think it was probably the third night, around about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was sat in the back bedroom along with two other investigators. There was two female investigators. One either sat sat next, one on my left, one to my right, and we were sat on the end of a double bed in the back bedroom in the pitch black, in the darkness. No sound whatsoever. We were just listening for the sounds around the environment in the house, because we were trying to get a feel of the place. And of course, at that time, there had been unusual sounds. So we're just listening out. And all of a sudden, out of the darkness comes this rasping breath from behind me. Definitely a male, very loud. And I recall looking to my right and looking at Carol, which was one of our investigators, and she was just looking dead at me and saying, I could tell from her expression that she was not going to look behind her. I looked to my left and Val was looking at me and she had that same expression on her face, Kevin. These women were looking at me to turn around. I'm the guy there, I'm I'm a big guy I am. And I thought, okay, at that time, be honest with you, I didn't really, want to turn around myself. I was a little bit nerved, considering what I'd experienced. I wasn't to know what was going to happen next. I mean, by the time I thought, okay, it's my job to turn around and have a look and face this thing, whatever it is, whatever's making this noise. I'm going to have to turn around and look into the darkness behind me to find out what it is. And literally, my chin reached my right shoulder as I was turning, and the next thing I remember, I'm not on the bed anymore. I'm in opposite the bed. There's like a dressing table, and I'm literally on the dressing table. I don't know how I got there. It's a good maybe 3 or 4 feet away, and I'm off the bed. I'm on this dressing table, and I'm feeling pain. My back's hurting. Something, by all intents and purpose, it clobbered me in the back, and not only that, but I ended up 3 or 4 feet ahead. Now, this is why I picked Jenny to write the book, because the only reason why I have not wrote the book is because I write very analytical, and I don't think I could ever have expressed how it felt for me on that investigation, being there at that moment, at that time. And Jenny does a wonderful job of placing you in that situation, and she's wrote it for absolutely perfectly, and capturing that moment in time. And I maybe just could not have wrote it that way, and she's done an excellent job. And to be honest, as I said to Jenny, I panicked. I actually, and first time I ran. First time I've admitted, I ran for it. I ran into the lounge. The lights went on. I was holding me back. The investigators rushed in. Carol and Val quick behind me, trying to figure out what the hell had gone on. They lifted up my back, the T-shirt, and a very 6 or 7 inch bruise was appearing. And it stayed with me for a couple of weeks or so. And it was, it hurt like hell. And after that, a couple of minutes later, I found myself outside at the front of the house, sat on the wall, trying to calm my nerves. And what went through my mind was just collecting my equipment and leaving and maybe doing something different, because I just didn't want to do this no more. I'd be honest, I was going to walk away from the subject because I was scared, because, if you can't protect yourself, if you can't see something, you can't protect yourself against something like that. What are you supposed to do? And suddenly a light bulb had switched on for me for the very first time, that some type of phenomenon like this truly does exist, and I cannot protect myself against it. I don't know what to do or how to deal with it.
Well, it must have been a whole rush of feelings to know that one thing that you had thought was just not a reality because there was no proof for it. Really opened up the door then in that moment to even when sat on the wall, even that opened up the door to all sorts of potentials that may be out there if this is possible. I bet that moment was a bit of a life-changing situation. And you probably felt bullied then. Did you felt picked on, or you felt as kind of like why it was you they wanted in that moment?
I felt vulnerable. It was as if like something had taken place to demonstrate. I was very skeptical. Maybe I shouldn't have been when I went in there, but maybe something wanted to prove to the fact that that some things are real, and boy did it do it. I mean, what was also interesting is that, when I think back, because people were trying to figure out how the hell did I get from 3 or 4 feet? I mean, I'm a big guy, and, and to shift me 4 feet isn't easy. And I did get clobbered hard. like a physical punch. But at the same time, now I have been in electrical engineering for quite some time. I obtained my degree with electrical engineering and went to work for NATO in RAF Weatherfields for a short time as a telecommunications officer. And being an electrical engineer, you do get the odd belt now and again. And of course, you know what it feels like when you get an electric shock. That repelling feeling that pushes you, throws you away from it. And it's done purposely to stop you from, continuing on electrical current. However, at the same time I got this punch, it was as if I had an electric shock at the same time. It was like a combination of an electric shock and a punch, which threw me across the room. And that would explain maybe how I managed to get 3 or 4 feet across from the bed. And that's the only way I can describe it. That is some type of electrical-based phenomena.
Absolutely. Well, what about the hearing the name over your shoulder as well when you was walking through the hallway and someone called your name and it was none of the team?
No, and in fact, it was a voice. It said, "Hello, Stevie." Now, it's not a word. It's not a name. It's called. Nobody calls me Stevie. And it was so profound, and it was as if it was just on my shoulder, down my ear, and I heard it as clear as day, and to the point where I went, quite goosebumpy. I remember looking at my arms, and they were all stuck up, my hairs, and and I turned around, and the first thing I realised is that there was nobody there. And secondly, even if it was, how did it happen? And I have no explanation amongst all the other things that took place there, Kevin. It was absolutely profound.
And again, there was the water as well, and this time you saw water droplets going up, not coming down.
I saw about 4 or 5 droplets, very large droplets. As the droplets were coming down in the kitchen, I saw maybe 4 or 5 large droplets head upwards. Now, at that time, I'd never heard of any case like this. I've heard of rumoured investigations of water manifestations, but that's it. Nothing like this. And it was coincidentally only a couple of years ago, whilst watching a television show called, I think it was Paranormal Witness, a TV show came out from the States, and one of them episodes in season 2 was known as the Rainmaker episode. And I remember sat there with my cup of tea, and my mouth was agape because it was as if I was watching the Rochdale Poltergeist case. Absolutely identical. Exactly the same things were taking place. Water formings, raining, some droplets going up. It was as if it was an exact situation. I couldn't believe that I've actually found another case identical, and that to me was amazing.
Yeah, and I bet it was because this is highly unusual. This particular case, and normally with these cases there is maybe children involved as well. If there's children in the property, it's more there's more of a chance of this happening, depending what the background circumstances are for it happening. But this is unusual. I mean, let's try. Okay, so you've done your investigations, you've documented, you've got all the evidence that you would need and more. What was the results then, first of all, for the water in the sense of the droplets, the samples?
The analysis came back, which was really interesting because it kind of fitted in very well with the fact that I'd already talked and documented my sensation of being thumped and, electrocuted at the same time, because it would seem that this phenomena, how it generates movement and stuff, is an electrical base phenomena. There is a natural electrical phenomena taking place at the same time, part of it. When we got the information back from Northwest Water Laboratories, and I've documented this in the book, and you can clearly see from the analysis, from the help that we've had from them, that they put a little ring around this part of the analysis and a little question mark there. And what they talked about is UCSMs. Now, what that is it's a conductive measurement of electrical conductivity within water. Now, there is a slight electrical conductivity in all water, because it comes out of our taps and it travels through copper pipes and so on and so forth. Any water traveling through any metal pipes picks up a slight electrical charge. It's natural. However, the normal is around about maybe 198, 193 UCSMs, and that's okay. It's not harmful to us, and we drink it on a regular basis. However, The water sample that we'd taken from the ceiling, the analysis not only showed normal things such as chlorine and sulfate and things like that, and that's just basically because there's microscopic particles in that water on the ceiling from the plaster, from the wallpaper that it's obviously in contact with. So they were that good, that thorough, they even picked out, you know, the microscopic levels in that. But what stuck out more so than anything else was its conductivity. The UCSM levels was something like 1,973 or something to that nature, and it was just ridiculous. I mean, what we're talking here is an electrical based phenomena which is driving this water. I mean, it was unheard of. And the analysis was just incredible, considering it fitted in quite well and comfortable with my previous experience in the back bedroom.
And there was, incredible. I mean, and there was teleportation taking place here as well, you think, with objects?
Well, this statuette, when Vera came in the following morning and we asked her, you know, where is this statuette? Because, you know, we came in the morning, Vera, and as you know, we did a 360 in every room on video, and we've looked through those videotapes. This item is not anywhere to be seen in the house. Can you tell us where it comes from? And she said, well, oh yeah, that's my late husband bought me that, and it sits on the side of the television. So on close inspection, you could actually see a slight ring, of dust just where this item sat, right next to the television. And you know what? We decided as a purpose to go back and yet again have a look at those videotapes. And when we arrived there at 15 minutes past 10 in the morning, it's not there. This item was never there to be in. So where did this item go? Did it disappear purposely in preparation of an early hours morning event, you know, which was a good maybe a good 12, 13 hours later?
Absolutely.
And where was it in that?
Exactly, and this wasn't the only object where, you know, there's been things in the bathroom and other places of the house. I mean, you know, this was just your experience, but, you know, the couple had plenty of experiences with absolutely.
Oh, plenty of things. I mean, they're an absolute. Vera was an absolute.
I can imagine.
Because, you know, just as she's always settling down, then something would project itself across the room. I'd actually interviewed the local vicar had been round. Now, what was really interesting that he was from a Catholic church, and Vera actually was a part-time cleaner there, and that's how he got involved. And he was a very nice gentleman. We went round to the church to interview him, and what was really, really surprising, now taking in consideration, he pictured a scene. This is a Catholic church and a Catholic priest. I was invited into his office. I sat down. I told him that I was looking into the disturbances at the Gardner home on behalf of Rochdale City Council. And his opening words to me was, oh, the poltergeist that they've got. And I went very quiet at that time because I thought this is not the norm that you suddenly would get from a Catholic priest. They're usually quite a lot more reserved than that. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, it would seem so. I mean, how, you know, what do you know about the situation? He said, oh, they've got a poltergeist. And I said, well, how do you ascertain that? And he said, well, I've been round twice. I said, but the first time I went round, a very large picture on the wall of, and it must have been a good maybe 4 foot by 2, and it was old 80s paintings, foiled paintings of tigers that we used to get with shiny gold and silver. It apparently launched itself off the wall across the room a good 5-6 foot and hit him on the top of that part of his thigh. And he said, you know, the corner of the frame dug in to his thigh and left a nasty bruise. He said that was my first encounter at that location. I quickly ascertained from what the family were telling me and what I was experiencing there that they were having a poltergeist infestation. I said, well, what was the second? What did you do from then? He said, well, I did apply to the diocese to conduct, a thorough blessing of the property. However, of course, like the Catholic Church probably know, as we know, that they immediately realised that a blessing of a property where there's a poltergeist infestation doesn't, or probably wouldn't be successful, or proactive. It's not a haunting at the end of the day, you know. So, I mean, I only believe about 12% of them are successful in hauntings anyway. However, you know, they decided very quickly that it tends to be more like haunted people as opposed to a haunted home. So a blessing of a property was completely useless and not productive at all. Also, he decided not to knock him back, basically, and say, well, you know, it's not necessary for you to conduct it. We don't want it. However, if you're going to assist with the family and so on and so forth, and that's what he did. I mean, he paid a couple of visits. He asked the family to go round to the church. That made no difference whatsoever, as you can well imagine. But he was absolutely 100% sure himself that the family were experiencing a poltergeist infestation. The Catholic Church had recognised the fact that they were having these disturbances, and of course the Rochdale City Council didn't know what to do about it, and of course this is why we had
right. So you reported your facts back to the council. How did they receive that? How did they take that?
Well, we had a sit-down meeting with them, and then at the end of the day, they're our clients, and we provide a report for them, because we have been involved in cases where, believe it or not, tenants, will sometimes come up with a hokey story and fake things to have a relocation, to be relocated. They don't want to live in that home anymore, and basically will come up with this fantastic story, which is a shame, really, for tenant associations and private landlords and city councils, because they have they have to do what they can do for tenants, and at the end of the day, the way things have become, tenants tend to have more rights than landlords these days, and unfortunately they have to be seen to assist. The downside to it is that the tenants can always push it to a point where they demand a relocation, and it's not always as easy as just snapping somebody's fingers and having somebody move. Especially nowadays, in the problem that we have having regarding the housing situation. However, they try and jump the queue and try and utilise stories like this to do so. And of course, the council have become a little bit suspicious about this and try and find out if can we obtain any evidence to support such claims. And of course, on this occasion, we had plenty. I mean, we provided a report with them. We had the photograph, we had the analysis, we had the affidavits, the testimonies from witnesses, the priests. Everybody was really helpful, and it was ascertained at that point in time that yes, they must have been having some type of disturbances. They agreed to relocate the family under these terms, and follow our advice about following the house.
That's very, very interesting, because let's then move the story forward. And we're not covering all the aspects here. To get the full aspect, you've got to read the book, basically, and it's all in there. But just when the tenants moved and were relocated, first of all, did it follow them?
Yes, it did. I didn't expect it to, but then I'd heard stories and rumours about poltergeist infestations are haunted people and not haunted homes, and in some cases they can seem to manifest in other locations. It did for about 3 weeks.
Well, that's interesting as well, because something else you put in the book was Mr. Gardner got a phone call from the council to a complaint about leaving all the windows open when he left. Now that's quite symbolic. That the poltergeist presumably left opened up all the windows as though it's leaving the house to follow them. No, or would you?
Well, there was an interesting case back in 1972 in South Yorkshire where a family were having a similar experiences in poltergeist infestation. They didn't have the water fillings, of course, and some professionals had told them that these things are intelligent. They can follow you. They know. They listen in, because things seem to disappear, and they're usually things of importance like keys or important papers and letters, because they listen in and watch and want to cause these problems because it generates more upset, and the more upset they generate, it would seem that these are fear feeders, emotion feeders. And the more upset they can cause, they seem to generate more phenomena, and it's a vicious circle, goes round and round. And of course, this particular family were trying to relocate to another home without talking about it, which, as you can well imagine, is very difficult, And they were slowly moving things out into a van and moving them off, and they made a point of not talking about where they were going and what they were doing. They were just literally packing up, moving. And it was only because a neighbour came out. And now the woman of the house was the last person at the house. She was just coming out. And a woman came across from the road and said, "Angela, are you moving?" And apparently a deep rasping voice came from the doorway, says, "Yes, they're flitting." Now, I just thought that was absolutely amusing, because if cases like that are real, and they do happen, then they are intelligent, these entities. And they can relocate themselves just as the family do. And that's exactly what we had for about 3 weeks in the other home. But it did fizzle out quite quickly. We were called out to the other home. We noted that some phenomena had started there, but it only lasted for about 3 weeks and fizzled out. And luckily, poltergeist infestations do seem to be a very short-term phenomena.
Yeah. Okay. So are you still in contact with the family nowadays?
I've not heard from the family for at least about 4 years.
And they wouldn't know about this book potentially.
Well, back then, back in I think we contacted them in 1998, and we're considering actually doing a book back in 1998 about the whole incident. But it's just one of those things. It never came around. I was never comfortable at writing it myself, because I don't think I mean, like I mentioned before, I don't write in a sense where I can place you in there with me. I'm very analytical at writing, unfortunately. And luckily the opportunity came, just to write. I risen because Jenny contacted me, and she's very good at writing those type of things and in that method of writing. And of course, we worked together to get the book out. I'm sure they'd be quite surprised about the book.
Yes,
sure
it's a fascinating case, and I think if anyone's going through the same thing or knows anyone that's going through the same thing, there is light at the end of the tunnel in a sense. But it's surprising, isn't it, that we didn't have to get there, to get someone in there to sort of move them on. They, by moving it, moved them on. You'd have thought that it may have stuck with them longer than 3 weeks, but it didn't. I
mean, I think it's just a whole. I mean, taking in consideration what we've learned is on some occasions we have to do what we refer to as starving the phenomena, because we found evidence to point that poltergeist infestations, unlike hauntings, seem to have a progressive nature. So you start off with, there seems to be different stages. And do you know what? It would seem that if you've investigated this phenomenon long enough, like myself, and took a specific study in this field, it would seem there is a rule book. And this rule book simply is that phenomena like poltergeist infestations is a progressive pattern, starting off with your audible disturbances, raps, bangs, scratching, those sorts of noises. And then, on to a second stage, which is your object manipulation, which can consist of stacking, moving, arranging, even items, apportation, asportation, sometimes items that don't even belong to the house can turn up. And of course, stage 3 tends to manifest then further along into apparitions. Now, they don't tend to be apparitions of humans or spirits, should we say, like ghostly figures. They tend to be of amorphous shapes, dark, light colours, from small to from dog size, and they can seem to be seen floating around the environment. Onto the 4th stages of physical manipulation, such as the prodding, the touching, the scratching, the pulling of the hair, and those sort of even to the point of injuries in some cases. And it can even reach even to the to psychological depression and oppression and those sort of things. But we have to take into consideration, it's very different than a haunting phenomena. These are haunted people, and it tends to be a short-lived phenomenon.
Yes, absolutely. And there was a case, there was a part of an aspect of this work where a psychic called you, I believe, to mention that there might be a box buried in the back garden that has something to do with the connection of why this spirit was there. Did you ever find that box?
We had information from a psychic who contacted more than one occasion about a box in the back garden that may have been buried and somehow associated to why the disturbance was taking place at the property. We thought it was very unusual that that anything would likely to be happening, because we are dealing with poltergeist infestations, and they don't tend to act in the same sense and manifest under the same conditions like hauntings do. Can be sometimes tied to locations and even items at that location. But nevertheless, though, we did find ourselves one afternoon digging the back garden up, looking for this box, which unfortunately we never did find. And it wasn't a surprise not to find it. But do you know what? At that time, because normally we would have never done that, but because we'd witnessed so many things that we'd never normally find, we just said, well, yeah, let's go for it, because nothing will surprise us anymore.
Well, who's to say that box is not there? It
could be, but we don't know. But what was interesting is a family did relocate into that home. We asked the council to leave it fallow, and that what basically means is completely void of any electrical phenomena. I mean, I'm not talking about just switching off your consumer unit. I'm talking about being stopped at the three-phase coming in to the building. Completely void of any electrical current in that environment, completely void of any human agencies in that environment for around about maybe 11 months. They did so, and after which they decided to open up the building for renting accommodation again. A family moved in there, and we had specialized forms done where we obtained the information without actually having to ask questions, tricky questions about the paranormal. Do you know the words? So without having to actually allow those people knowing that we're asking questions about the paranormal field, we have a specialized question form. And we gave them one of those and asked them to complete it, and yes, they did. And from what we've gathered, the information, that everything seems fine for them. They didn't seem to have a problem, and that's not surprising again in itself, because we are dealing with haunted people and not haunted locations.
Absolutely, very interesting, and I just wonder what the whole point of this activity was. Who had felt they'd had an injustice to them done to sort of want to come through, and make themselves known as they did.
I think it's a combination of events. I mean, taking in consideration that Vera had lost her husband, then which was obviously a very emotional time for her because he did die in the building, and then that there was obviously the problems that they were having with Jeanette because of the disability that she had. Then there was taken into consideration that they did have a grandchild which wasn't living with the mother at that time but was visiting, and she also, the grandchild had also had some quite disturbing experiences whilst in there of a hair being pulled and things like that, which she was obviously upsetting. Then the fact that obviously she'd met Mr. Gardner and it settled with Mr. Gardner and married him. And of course, there was obviously a lot of upset and a lot of change, and obviously maybe some financial problems as well coming into consideration. And this tends to be a stereotypical platform for poltergeist infestations. If we look back through the cases of the most best evidential documented cases, you'll find a pattern that these families of that type of nature are sometimes, they seem to be a magnet for this phenomenon, like a moth to a light bulb. Poltergeist infestations seem to manifest around troubled individuals and troubled families. And no different than the Enfield poltergeist case and many others alike. And it would seem it would follow the general pattern of events. And again, be sure.
It's almost like if some energy has not moved on to where it came from. So if for example, a spirit hasn't gone home and it's stuck on here in another dimension, but in this space maybe, and it's able to come in and out of our reality and see what we're up to. But it's lost in a sense. It hasn't gone home. Maybe for its own reasons it doesn't want to. Maybe it's been roaming for a long time, and as you say, any negative situations will attract it for it to leach onto. So it may not have been her deceased husband. She may have desperately wanted to be that, but it's actually something else.
Yes. Well, this type of phenomenon, poltergeist infestations, have some wonderful methods doing things, and one of them is known as mimic phenomena. If you think you're being haunted by Uncle Albert, it can sometimes manifest as Uncle Albert, and lead people to believe, which supports the fact of fear and unusualities. When that happens, emotion is released by the people in that environment, and the phenomena feeds from it and creates more phenomena by doing so. And of course, they witness the phenomena. There is no wasted actions in poltergeist infestations. Things are moved, and we also noted that things of displacement. The displacement is a name given to something which is moved from one location to another under paranormal means, which seems to be exactly the same method and exactly the same length they've moved. And you'll find this 2 or 3 times sometimes on certain locations. When you actually bother measuring how far an object's moved, you might find that it's moved 26.9 inches, exactly the same as another item and it's somewhere else in the location. They are very precise, and they can be enticed, and they are intelligent. These things are definitely some type of fear feeders. It would seem that the more settled the people are in that environment, if we can go in and educate them and get them to relinquish some of that fear and control their emotions, then if they're feeling a bit better, then the phenomena does decrease to the point where, if you educate them long enough, on dealing with these disturbances and how to react towards them, you can actually diminish the activity. under certain lengths of time. But it's very problematic because automatically we have a natural response to fear the unknown, and it's very difficult for people to not fear it and gain control over their emotions. And that's probably one of the big
That's right.
problems.
I mean, this is just a very, very interesting case. This really is. And what would you say then? Because obviously we're getting to the end of the interview here right now. But what would you say is one of the most important messages that you could give to the audience with all the experience that you've gained from what you're doing?
Well, I mean, I totally disregard what they read 99% of the time, what they might see on television, on the news. I mean, phenomena does take place. It is a rarity. No matter what you see over the internet, poltergeists are everywhere, according on YouTube, but they're not real. They're not true. They are extremely a rare phenomena. And I'd only investigated 4 cases in 33 years. That's how rare they are. And considering I've spent maybe 3,000 hauntings in 33 years, so it just goes to show it's such a rare phenomenon. But when dealing with such things, it's a matter of contacting somebody who they can trust. If they do contact in the housing associations or if they are tenants, then, they can gain assistance. Most do have a protocol with dealing with such things. However, it's not known. It's not something that is publicly put out there, as you can well imagine, because it generates questions. But yeah, these things do happen.
Well, Stephen, I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Kevin. And the book's available on through Amazon. It's known as The Rochdale Poltergeist for Jenny Ashford, who's an excellent writer, and she's wrote it in such a way where she places you right by my side, so you'll experience what I experienced going through that investigation. And of course, the details, there's photographs in there and of the phenomena as it happened, taking place on the ceiling and the water damage and all sorts of different things, as well as the analysis. It was an incredible investigation. I won't ever forget, to be honest, and probably the most frightening event I've ever experienced.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.